Connelly. I graduated from Drexel in 1987 with an MBA, and I'm happy to present to you today on the topic of negotiating compensation. By way of introduction, I've been in human resources for about 30 years, a variety of specialties, but have spent much time negotiating with potential candidates, and most of the time it's been successful in having them join the company. So I'm happy to share some insight with you on the negotiating process coming into a company, and then also share some tidbits of news about negotiating compensation items when you're already working for a company. So 4 topics I'd like to really address. What's negotiable? What are some of the things on the table that typically are considered when negotiating a new position and joining a company? Who are you dealing with? Talked a little bit about the HR folks. You'll typically deal with either a hiring manager or a human resources manager. Talk a little bit about negotiating inside, some of the differences about when you're part of a company versus when you're negotiating to get inside a company from an external source. And then some simple reminders about closing the deal. So what's negotiable? I listed close to 7 items on this slide. And typically when folks think about negotiating an offer for a new company, base salary is the first thing that comes to mind. Where there's much more than base salary, and let me kind of tick through. There's time off, vacation, also can be a negotiable item, more rather than less. Signing bonuses are typically pretty common on negotiating packages, and I'll speak a little bit more detail. Telecommuting arrangements. More and more we're seeing companies relaxing their rules on where you need to work. And there's been a revolution in the past 10, 15 years about having folks working outside the office. So there's more acceptance of that. Relocation packages. Typically, there's a couple different avenues you can negotiate when you're relocating. Car allowances, that's typically reserved for higher level positions. Long-term incentives, common in a lot of American companies, and severance packages when you're going in. So let's kind of go back up to the top. So base salary, typically that is going to be the bi-weekly or monthly salary that you're going to negotiate on. That's one of the most common aspects of negotiating, and that's what's going to show up in your paycheck, every 2 weeks or every month. And typically most folks will look for a increase in their current base salary when they want to move to a new position, but that's not always the case. If you're looking for a lateral move, maybe the same salary is appropriate. Very rarely do I see folks take less money, but when they're not working and they're anxious to get into the job market, somebody would be a little bit more flexible to take a lower base salary. So base salary is probably one of the biggest, and I'll come back to it with some more rules of thumb. Time off. Vacation is a popular one, and typically the old school method was 10 days per year for your first year of service. And companies used to stick to that pretty rigidly, but you'll find more and more that based upon your years of experience, based upon your industry, again, there's more acceptance to negotiate higher levels of vacation. Typically they're done in week blocks, so 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, 25 days. Typically the company that I work with, we very rarely will go above 20 days of service, 20 days of vacation. Quite typically it's either 10 days or 15 days when we're bringing somebody new into the company. Signing bonuses. I know in a lot of cases we'll offer signing bonuses where maybe we can't get a large enough increase in base salary for internal equity reasons. I can't give somebody a lot more money because I already have 4 or 5 incumbents in the role making X. So I don't want to mess up my internal equity. So what I can do for folks is I offer a signing bonus. You know, it could be as little as 2,000. I've offered 5,000, 10,000, 20, 25, depending on the complexity and level of the jobs. I've offered signing bonuses to give somebody a little bit more because I really can't give much of an increase or a lift in base salary. I'll also give a signing bonus if somebody has a tuition debt that they're on the hook for from leaving their company. Typically, companies require you to work another year in order not to repay tuition assistance. So I'll offer some signing bonus to help repay that. Same thing with relocation expenses. If you relocate with your current company and you're looking to move and you leave within a 1 or 2 year window, a lot of companies will make you pay a prorated portion of that relocation bonus that they've outlaid for you. So sign-on bonus can offset that. Think about grossing up for taxes, right? Because when you receive a signing bonus, unless you ask for it or unless the company tells you about it, it's typically going to be taxed, and you'll come away with $20,000 less applicable taxes. COBRA would be another reason that I would give a signing bonus, right? Typically, when you move from one company to another, there's a waiting period. Very common is that there's a 1 month wait in order for you to be eligible for benefits, and then your benefits start on the first of the month following that 1 month wait. So typically you might have to pay 1 month's worth of COBRA. So that's another way that we would use for signing bonuses. So if you can put together and present your case clearly to the HR person you're dealing with, the headhunter, that this is the out-of-pocket monies that I'm going to need to be kept whole or I don't want to lose, bundle that, we can package that and put that in the signing bonus category. Telecommuting arrangements, again, negotiating working from home. Companies are much more liberal in that as they have been in the past 10 years. So 1 day a week working from home, 2 days a week are becoming more and more popular, and you can negotiate that up front, and it might work to the company's advantage if they're short on office space. So do a little bit of research in terms of what the practice is on telecommuting, but also look at as an option. Relocation packages. The housing market has been in such a state of flux over the past couple of years that companies, when they relocate you beyond 50 miles, should offer you some type of relocation package. And that would include closing cost on selling your house, closing cost on buying your house, movement of household goods from point A to point B, typically miscellaneous allowances to help you cover deposits or utilities, temporary housing and temporary living, 30, 60 days is typically part of a relocation package. What's now not becoming popular because of the housing market is offering to buy your house. So typically a company will say, listen, I'll move you. I'll also offer you loss on home sale up to a certain dollar amount, but I'm not going to buy your house. I'm not going to take over that responsibility. So that might be a negotiating tactic for you to stress with your with the new potential company. Will you buy my house? Will you do a guaranteed buyout option? But relocation packages are negotiable items. Car allowances, typically companies are getting away from giving cars, leased cars, and more popular is a car allowance. And depending on the level you are with the company, whether you're a senior level manager, executive, you would negotiate a car allowance or ask the question, do you have car allowances? If you're in a sales position, typically that's automatically part of your compensation package. And again, could be a leased car or it could be an auto allowance. But sales or sellers need cars as part of their job, so typically that's part of the package. Long-term incentives, You can negotiate with companies for to be part of the company's stock program, restricted stocks, where they give you stock and then they require you to hold it for a certain amount of time before you can cash it out. So that's popular again at the senior level manager, the executive level manager. Sometimes you can negotiate stock options down the road for good performance. If I meet this objective, or if I come on board and perform well above expectations, can we negotiate something a year out for stock options? So that's clearly at play. And severance packages, I've seen in some cases where you can negotiate. You're coming into a new company, new culture, maybe it's a new position, kind of uncharted territory, uncharted waters, and you want to have a little protection. So you can negotiate, hey, listen, if something happens, you're not happy with me, my position goes away, is there an opportunity for a severance package, and put that in your agreement. Sometimes companies have pretty standard procedures, but sometimes they don't. So it's not a bad thing to ask for as you're going through. So that's typically what's negotiable. What I've come up and encountered with in my dealings. So who are you dealing with? So a lot of times you're dealing with the HR person, the gatekeeper, if you will. So you need to really research the company and find out a little bit about their compensation packages, and quite frankly, what's negotiable. Friends, your network, get some insight, because as you begin to negotiate from a position of knowledge. What are the company's pay practices? Do they typically pay at the 50th percentile? Do they pay higher at the 75th percentile? That'll give you a little bit of an idea of where folks are paying out. You need to know your industries, because there's nuances in pay practices for different industries. The financial markets. I happen to work in the chemical industry. There are the advertising markets. There's high tech. Every industry has their own nuances. So be familiar with what those nuances are, and don't leave anything on the table. When you're dealing with a recruiter, a lot of times you'll get introduced to a company through a recruiter. That person, depending on what their relationship is with the company, they could be working both sides of the fence. Obviously, they want additional business from the company, so they're going to be cognizant of, they're going to pay me, so I need to really represent them well. But they also want the candidate to get the job, and they want to close these jobs as quickly as possible. So get to know the recruiter and what their relationship is with the company. Also understand, how does the company operate? Some companies like to throw lowball offers out, expecting the candidate to come back and encounter. I prefer to give it our best foot forward up front. I want to be fair. I want the process to go quickly. So depending on practices with the company, you should know that. And there's good ways to kind of network and find out a little bit more about the company. I mentioned HR is the gatekeeper, right? I want candidates to deal with me. I don't want them to deal with the hiring manager. That way I can protect the candidate to a certain extent. If they say something off the wall, and maybe it's just out of ignorance or lack of knowledge, but if they're real strong and they say something, I can kind of protect them from themselves. As opposed to if they're dealing directly with the hiring manager might say, oof, what am I getting here? So I like to be the gatekeeper and do the negotiating. I never want the candidate to deal directly with the hiring manager. I want to maintain that relationship there. I mentioned a little bit about recruiters also playing a role. Get to know what the relationship. I work with a guy for 7 years. He knows the company well. I've never had a bad hire from him. So he's as much advocating working for the company and knows how I operate and how I negotiate. So that's an important thing to know as well. Clearly understand what the compensation range is for the potential position. And I got some feedback from a couple of recruiters that I have a real strong relationship with. be realistic in terms of what you're looking for the job. He gave a great example where when he was speaking to a potential candidate, the candidate said, "What's the range for the position?" And the recruiter said 80 to 110. Well, that candidate automatically jumped up to $110,000. I want that. I'm not budging on it. Companies look at your experience where you're at. So be smart and be realistic when you're negotiating, and know what the range is and where you might fit within the range. Um, don't embarrass yourself, and know that up front. In fact, I wouldn't ask that in the first interview, but as you get closer to an offer stage, start to gather some data on compensation. Salary.com, you probably have heard it before. It's a weak source for researching market rates. It's a kind of a hodgepodge of surveys from different sources. You don't know how old the data is, how credible the data. So, I never take anybody credible when it's, well, on salary.com, my job should be paying 100. It's better to look at industry-specific data through, the American Institute of CPAs, the Institute for Electrical Engineers. Go to trade journals and get the data that they publish, because that's more realistic data that they're getting right from members. So be careful about that. Other things, what are you dealing with, right? So companies have budgets. So they typically have an idea what they want to pay for a position. That's going to include base salary, any bonus, and a fringe rate, which is all the benefits, the holidays mixed together. So they have a budget in mind. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, they have internal equity to maintain. So, if they have very good performers already there, they're not going to bring you way above that well-performing group. They're a known entity unless you have a real special skill set. So know that going in. Deviations can occur, right? So negotiating is a good thing. Don't be afraid to negotiate, but have your facts set for why you want certain things. Just don't throw something out there and not have facts and a relationship to back that up. That's how you lose credibility within the process. Companies review your current comp and desired compensation needs, right? So they look at where you are now, where they have in their mind, and they should have given you a range already. And the norm is, 10 to 15% is what folks are going to look to give to have you jump. I'm not going to go much higher than that. And the national data shows, about a 10% is probably about the right. Could be less, could be a little bit more. The base salary versus the bonuses could differ. So there's a lot in play there, but they're going to look at your current comp, look at the job you're moving into, and kind of look at a natural progression. Don't expect to ever get, again, unless it's a rare situation, 25, 30, 40% jumps. The recruiter was funny as he was talking to me last week. He said, if you're behind in the market and you think you're behind, don't ever expect one company to make up that delta. Like the example I gave you, if you think you're worth 110 but you're at 80, there's no way the company is going to make up that gap. So be realistic in your expectations there. I like a candidate to be excited when they get an offer, right? So I'm always looking to put together a package that I know is within the range that the candidate wants. If it's not in that range, I'm going to tell them early on. I'm going to set realistic expectations. I want somebody to be excited or feel like they've been fairly treated when they get an offer from me. And I think most HR folks, because the excitement builds from the time that you make the offer until they join the company. So I want that experience to be strong. Good data to know. It's also good to know as you're looking at, once you join a company, what's been the history of merit increases, so you can project what your salary progression can be over the next 2 or 3 years. Obviously, the market's going to dictate, what a company's salary merit budget is, but it's good to know. It's not a bad question to ask. What's the bonus payouts been for the company? Many more companies are offering bonuses all the way down to the frontline employee. And it's good to know what percentage of payouts. That'll give you an idea of how the company's performance has been. Ask, what's a typical promotional adjustment in a company? Are there off-cycle adjustments that are offered throughout the year other than merit increase times? And find out the frequency. Again, be realistic in your expectations. Ask for details on employee stock purchase programs. That's programs where you can buy company stock at a discounted price, as well as restricted stock award programs where the company will give you stock, but you need to remain. It's a retention vehicle. You need to remain at the company for a certain number of years. Ask about the company's plan documents with regards to benefit plans and cost, bonus plan documents, tuition reimbursement if you're going back for a master's, get some more details on that. Relocation policy, you want to get all the data in writing so you can analyze what that looks like. That helps you negotiate from a much stronger standpoint. It also looks like you know what you're talking about. It brings some credibility to you. Counteroffers. Again, my recruiter friend came back to me. Very rarely do we as a company, or in all my current HR, do I counteroffer. Once somebody's made the decision to leave, we've 99% of the time they've mentally checked out, they're ready to go. So I rarely make a counteroffer. Only in very rare cases where there's some data that tells me that I missed something and I might be able to retain them, do I do that. A lot of times, if you are made an offer by a new company and your company counteroffers you, and you go back, well, my company made me a counteroffer, that doesn't sit too well with the new company. In fact, we tend to back off, and whether there was some gamesmanship being played, we're not quite sure, but that doesn't necessarily sit well with companies. So be aware of that. And then the statistics illustrate that 84% of those that accept counteroffers with their current companies are fired within 90 days. So just beware when you go in that direction. Negotiating on the inside. So some tidbits, some ideas on looking for adjustments when you're already part of a company. Most companies have a standard practice or policy for promoting individuals and what those promotional increases look like, typically 5 to 10%. There could be a higher bonus. In our company, when you move to a higher grade level, there's higher bonus levels, so there could be a higher bonus target attached as you move, so ask for those questions. But a lot of times bonus amounts are pretty well standardized, and there's not a lot of play offered there. But the promotional adjustments, there might be a little bit of play there. Other opportunities to negotiate from the inside would include, I mentioned percentage increase, one-time bonuses. From time to time, we'll offer a one-time only bonus to offset maybe a move to a different location, to offset maybe the loss of some overtime. So we'll do one-time bonuses, but not often. Telecommuting, you might negotiate an additional day or new telecommuting arrangement from the get-go. We have a telecommuting agreement that I have folks sign, just stipulating how that's supposed to work. Stock options. Some companies will offer stock options for promotions, especially if you get to a higher stock option eligible position. And enhanced relocation packages. We have a set amount on loss on home sale from when you bought it to when you sell it. If you're in the hole or losing money, we'll offer a set dollar amount, but we play with that amount a little bit, and we can raise that to offset that. So there's some of the typical things. Typically, I will not negotiate increases in vacation because we try and have that standardized, and I don't want to get the word out that you can negotiate time off with pay. That's, in my mind, just a bad practice. But check with the company. That might be a practice that's held in the company and on the table. Closing the deal. This goes really, hopefully without saying, is you always want to get it in writing. So always request a letter, whether it's an offer letter, promotion letter, confirming all the points that the two sides have agreed to. Read the letter. Sometimes there's typos. Sometimes there's mistakes made. Make sure you understand all the points when they're effective. Don't leave anything to chance. And if something's vague, go back and ask for it to be clarified. HR folks are happy to do that. We want common understanding when you're promoted or coming in the door. I don't want anybody frustrated or feel like they were mistreated by some vague words. So ask. So that's really the high points in terms of, and I've got a special note of thanks to Nick Hope of Hope and Associates, who gave me some pointers with regards to negotiating compensation. It's a little bit of a nerve-wracking process, I would admit, but as long as you're honest, forthright, you have a good basis for what you're asking for. It seems realistic, and you present it in a calm, methodical manner. Most HR folks will take it into account. And remember, many HR folks are packaging what you're saying as a candidate and then bringing that to the hiring manager. So as much as you can help the HR person understand and package it correctly, it's a much easier sell down the road to getting what you want. So it's again, a little bit challenging, a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's all part of the workforce. And those that do it well, those that ask the question in a polite manner, are rewarded. So don't be afraid to ask. It was great having the chance to present to you. I wish you good luck in your current jobs and your job search.